is time indeed, excuse me. Welcome back as we're ready to move on in the minor league. Now, normally we'd bring you NA and NA, but as Graham highlighted, today we're going with a little bit more EU-centric. So we're going to bring you Simplicity versus Exordium right on the other side. But first, I do want to remind you that you should be getting in on this Spooky Squad Cupid and Kumbhakarna skins. Make sure you get those, as those have been just released. So make sure you get in on that as soon as possible in your SMITE client. But totally, as I was saying, Simplicity, Exordium, Simplicity, a top-end team. Yes. Exordium still has not found a win. This is going to be a tough task, I think, for this Exordium squad.
It really is, because on one end, you got such notable players like maniaKK, Faeles, DeathPanter, Genetics as well has been streaming a lot. So a lot of aggressive support picks out of him. I think that out of Exordium, they're going to need to come out the gates firing.
Absolutely. You got to come in and hit Simplicity in the mouth right away, I think, because if you let Simplicity get to their pacing and play their game, I imagine that's going to be very difficult. With these teams that are punching up the heavy underdogs, I'm not saying, you know, a 3 versus 5 seed. This is top of the league versus the bottom of the league. I think you've got to come with something weird, and you've got to come with something that does well in the early game, because you almost certainly won't make it to the late game.
Could be in a strategy where you focus out StreakUp. I think that all the mages that he's been playing in the long lane could be exploitable, but it's up to Froisan in the jungle role to do something about it.
We'll see if that's exactly what they're going to do as we are ready for picks and bans. Simplicity going to lead us off with that top pick slot. Feel like top pick is in a pretty good position right now, and that's usually because there's one god that's just better than the rest. And right now, I think that's Isis that is just better than everyone else that's possibly able to pick. And when that is the case, I think that usually favors the first pick team.
Yeah, I think the first top 3 are like the Isis, the Set, and the Thors of the world that you want to ban away, even though Thor was letting through for the last pick in 2 of 3 games in that very first set.
Sure.
And outside of that, then you got like your Khepris, your Zhong, your Chronoses. Those are like kind of your mid-tier throwaway bans that you kind of have to do your homework of what the other teams like to play.
Yeah, I agree. I think that going to this 10-ban system does alleviate some of that advantage that first pick would typically have in a meta like this, as Simplicity actually decided to ban away Isis themselves, which is very surprising to me. I think you're basically handcuffing Exordium into banning Isis or Set, and Simplicity decided to ban both themselves.
But that's the Merlin pick. That's something that they were probably going to lean on for a StreakUp in that long lane. So with that option not available, probably could lean for the Thor out of Faeles. But then again, he likes a lot of other junglers besides the Thor, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him maybe go for the Susanoo or the Ratatasker.
Zhong ends up being the pick, as I agree with you. I think Faeles will go likely in a different direction given the opportunity. Little surprised that they don't go Chronos, but I guess Zhong, a little bit of a different flavor. Also could go to maniaKK, and I think that if Simplicity gives given the option, they might go Zhong and Chronos, and Exordium recognize that and take it for themselves.
Hard to really kill the Zhong, no matter what lane you stick him in, mid, short, or that long lane. So it's about Exordium getting to the late game to try to utilize that Chronos passive. But 2 magical gods right off the bat for Exordium. Good global pressure on the World Serpent. I think that's a very safe pick in the short lane.
Yeah, Jorm, not a lot of terrible matchups or anything like that. Can kind of do his thing regardless, so we'll see if that's what ends up happening for Exordium. We did see Outcold take Jormungandr into the support role earlier on today. Didn't end up working out, but Breeze did have a great early game in that one, so maybe that's what Exordium is going to look for. As Terra locked in for Genetics, I'd imagine, in that support role on her, and what I imagine will be for DeathPanter, as he's been playing mid lane hunters far longer than everybody else.
Oh, yeah.
Meta be damned, my man likes picking hunters in the mid lane.
Back in Season 4 Elevate days, the triple Guardian, double Hunter composition. No stranger to those kinds of matchups. But up against an Ullr, more than likely, in that mid lane, it's up to Angry to find that early edge.
I don't mind it. I mean, Ullr is still a pick that I think can have a lot of effectiveness, can still fight very, very well, and can punish Anhur with his slow leap and the ability that it takes him a little bit to clear the wave in Impale. So I like this idea from Exordium. I wanted a little bit of early game. Ullr certainly provides that, and is a character that can start to snowball out of control.
It definitely could be. You got to watch out for any sort of rotations from the jungler. You can't be out of position before level 5, especially as an Anhur, before granting access to that CC immune Desert Fury ultimate. So worried about some team fight potential is Exordium with that ban.
Yeah, taken away here by Simplicity, looking at the support role as they already have their support locked in. Exordium with a couple bans against Faeles in Hunbat and Pele. But as you mentioned, I mean, Faeles, I feel like has a very wide god pool right
does.
now. Can play just about anything. Ratatoskr comes to mind for sure, but I don't know that it's worth my time really trying to ban out Faeles because he just feels like he can play just about anything. Hell, he might even play this Terra. I mean, he's been playing Guardians. He played Ganesha jungle. Terra certainly has got to be on the docket.
It definitely should be the case that you have to worry about his Kali, maybe his Bakasura. He has the basic attackers alongside the abilities. Keep in mind, Thor still available for both of these teams, but with the Serqet locked in, it's doubtful that Exordium is going to lock it in for the last pick. And then how could we forget about Naja?
Yeah, Faeles Naja definitely likes that one a lot, so that's a strong pick, I think, for simplicity right here. And they're going to round out their draft with, I imagine, something for the solo laner. maniaKK could go with Osiris, still open in this slot. Going to be Thoth, so that tells me that Zhong is going solo. Thoth going ADC here for StreakUp.
That's what it's feeling like to me, unless they're going to spice things up with potentially a Thoth in the jungle, Terra in the solo lane, Naja support. Like, I could see Simplicity kind of having a little bit of fun this set.
I could see it too. Maybe not in game one. I think that's the only difference is Ganesh is locked in, but not for Faeles in the jungle this time. It's going to be for Exordium in this support role. We said we wanted something aggressive early on for Exordium. Does this fit the bill?
I think so. Yeah, Ganesh and Serqet alongside, making those rotations in the mid, probably with the Ullr. That 3v3 matchup should favor out Exordium.
Simplicity looked human last week up against Horizon Union. We'll see if Exordium can exploit that this week. Game one coming at you right now.
As opposed to the Titans they normally look like. Simplicity and Exordium. Game one underway. Finch and Taco here. Thank you. Aggro and Toli on the desk as we move into yet more SML EU action. And we've already seen some really strong teams. Kesa, who are up near the top, but Simplicity, I think in a lot of people's mind, are kind of the power-ranked sort of top team, if you know what I mean. This is the team that you just don't want to be playing up against.
Without a doubt. I mean, Simplicity has been reigning in top of the European minor league for pretty much the entire year, Finch. It has not been an easy task for a lot of these other minor league teams to keep up, but I think in the same fold, Simplicity has also kind of elevated the level of competition that these teams try and prep for when dealing with the well, pretty much the Giants.
Exactly. It's not easy when you're trying to come in and prep for a team that's basically stacked with people that could be in the SPL tomorrow, right? I think, just about everyone on this team has played at that level before and could probably play at that level again if need be. But right now, they're kind of rocking here at the minor league. They even showed us when they came at the MSI, this can potentially be a strong team. But up against here, Exordium, as long as they stay focused, I think they have a good chance to win.
And we got a little bit of a glimpse of the compositions as well and how that early game was beginning to unfold. I think that having that Thoth presence in the long lane, definitely a right take, and pretty much the most consistent factor that we've had so far with a lot of these teams, whether it's minor league or pro league, has just been tossing those mages into the long lane, letting them get all that solo experience and farm, and then hopefully making the big impacts later on.
Yeah, Thoth can be really difficult sometimes to lane up against too, right? Because he has better poke than you from range, and he also has really good all-in potential with the evade and punish, following that up with the hieroglyphic assault, and then suddenly you're dead in lane, and now there's a Thoth that's ahead and fed and has all these items over there in the long lane. So yeah, no longer is it the realm of hunters battling back and forth. It's just mages over there killing people.
And every now and then we see a hunter try to kind of, break through, but it just feels so difficult for a lot of these hunters to try and keep up with some of the magical item prioritization. I mean, Dynasty Plate Helm has been a massive one, I think, that has really made so many hunters uninterested in trying to take that 1v1 boxing matchup, and for good reason. I mean, an item at T1 that gives you 10 power, 20 physical prots, that's pretty good. I'll take the 20 prots all day long.
Yeah, not bad at all, right? We've seen Jormungandrs go with it over there in the solo lane as well. So clearly the item itself has just become strong. And I think part of the reason why Simplicity are at this point that we're seeing them at now, where so many other teams had to be worried about this team and how strong they are, is because of the players that are on it, just how stacked this roster is from top to bottom. I mean, you think about DeathPanter for this team, right? You think about maniaKK, and Faeles has really come alive here in the jungle for this team when he's had some struggles at some other levels before. So they clearly have found their rhythm.
That's probably the biggest player development in my mind, Finch, throughout the course of the past 2 years even, because I'm factoring in Faeles' time in the Pro League as well.
Sure.
That was largely unsuccessful, but I don't think it was to any fault of his own for the most part. I think that SK roster just in general really struggled to make it work, and sometimes that's just how it goes. You can get 5 really awesome players together, but they don't necessarily mesh, and with this roster, Faeles definitely meshes, and I think that it's helped giving him a new level of confidence.
It has, and I've said it multiple times before that it feels like he's found a new life here in the minor league. I've been very, very impressed with what we've seen from him here, and hopefully he'll be able to keep that going and then maybe even get back up there to the SPL level at some point. If that's, his aspiration, something that you'd like to do. But we are back into the action here between Simplicity and Exordium. And so far, everything's looking about how we would expect. Nothing particularly wild stands out. Faeles, no blink, though. So look at Froisan to be a little bit more aggressive.
Froisan definitely is going to have much more opportunity with the Serqet, but also much more risk of being punished. Taking that blink as opposed to the beads for Ganesha, I think it's pretty much player preference whether you want that blink or beads in the early game. Really also kind of depends on the enemy team composition, and if Faeles is that concerned about Ullr, Chronos, Serqet setup, ending him before he has a chance to take anybody up into the air with that Windfire Wheels, then maybe Froisan's going to also just have to be a little bit more respectful than what we would probably anticipate when initially seeing this blink on the Serqet.
Exordium's draft is pretty aggressive. That 3v3 of Ullr, Ganesh, and Serqet, they are looking to throw down at any given moment. So Simplicity, I think, rightfully kind of staying a bit back and giving them their due credence as DeathPanter gets chunked by the bladed arrow. That's just what Ullr can do to you. That's why you put him here in the middle lane, is to try and establish that pressure.
Angry as well, I think, is honestly one of the players that we should be talking more about, because even though Exordium hasn't always won every single set that they've played or every single game, I think that Angry has definitely been a standout member for this roster.
He's leading the red buff invade. Genetics is here to try and defend a blink used to reposition. And I don't know, man. I think that has worked. They're done looking for the invade. DeathPanter has to use beads in order to reposition, but all right, there you go. Red buff defended.
DeathPanter getting a little bit of haircut there. Got kind of lucky that the creep wave was coming in at that exact moment. Believe that head minion actually ate that Ullr axe as opposed to the Anhur. But mission accomplished for Genetics. The blink might have looked weird, but it did get the job done.
Yes. Can't criticize too much if the end result was achieved. And I doubt Genetics will be too worried about having the blink anytime soon anyway. So very little harm, if any, and certainly no foul.
A little bit of laughing. There's just, I don't know, it's something about the way Genetics just walks up to the wave. He's doing absolutely nothing, by the way. He's just like, ha ha ha.
Got him.
Look at me now.
We need more Rom back in the SPL. What happened to him? Is it just being purely auto-attack focus isn't good enough anymore?
We need a lot more Rom, a lot more Raw, I think.
You want more Raw? Oh, just for good
just
laughs.
For
You're following
no,
me.
I'm on the same page as you.
So what happened is I did that bit to go along with your laugh thing you talked about, and then I forgot in the middle why I was doing it, and just started wishing that Raw was played. But yes, good work by you there.
If you want the honest answer, though, for as to why we don't see more Rom, just not as much security around those buffs, man. He's
if he's mid, yeah.
Much higher grade, I think, is required to consistently make Rom worthwhile, but he just has such a long ramp-up time, and even if you're able to clear the wave efficiently through those astral arrows, you're able to get pressured elsewhere because all you really have to offer in the early game is those astral arrows.
Exactly right, and nowadays there are people who can essentially match Rom's late game with a much better early.
Look at this. Go back to that duel lane real quick, though. What is this?
This is Thoth.
This is what SMITE has done to all of us, man. This is an injustice to every Hunter player out there. Trust me, guys, I feel your pain. We don't want to see Thoth Chronos matchups anymore either. I'm tired. I'm sick of this, Finch.
I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you. Apparently, Mage it's so hard. What Ryan really means is the mid roll that he doesn't like. Mage has been OP, man. I won't hear anything else on the issue.
Mages are stupid busted.
Yes.
Mid
lane
just
maybe is not
because
great.
he's like, oh, I'm not 7 levels above my opponent anymore. That's the only reason why aggro has any complaints.
Has aggression ever been 7 levels above his opponent? I doubt it. Go back and check the tape. I doubt it. But back here in this matchup we're watching now, maybe in co-op, yes. Little is happening. Cozyx is going directly into the Stone of Binding to get started, but Itori might be in trouble. Faeles making a rotation, but misses the Windfire Wheels and the Final Judgment rewind off from Itori, and now he's stepping on the gas. They're all out of cooldown, so why not? Exordium survives the gank.
Itori kind of just trying to flex on him for a second, but thinks better of it, even with Faeles and StreakUp having expended most of their cooldowns. Both that Ganesha and Thoth know sticking around is just asking for trouble, and sure enough, Froisan making his appearance in this long lane now. Just let StreakUp know they made the right decision backing off.
I think if you're Faeles, you could at least say, we did get his beads, right? Like, Itori's beads are on cooldown now, so the next time that Faeles comes through there, Itori is a bit open. But yeah, that gank definitely where some pieces needed to be more lined up on that one. They'll get another shot, I'm sure, at it to try and run that back a little bit better.
To be fair, I think even if StreakUp did connect with the final judgment, it probably still isn't a kill.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think the damage was there either way. Definitely needed that wind fire wheels first to connect, but Itori probably
I'm pretty
still
sure
not
that
happy.
if Final Judgment had hit, that'd have been the first thing that had happened to Itori at that fight.
No, Faeles did land the sash, but
Okay,
it
there you
was on the Chronos as he got the rewind off, so it didn't really make a difference.
They end up making it out of there. You know, I was going to ask you about this start here for Cozyx earlier, but then that gank attempt happened in the long lane. Now that we do have a moment, it looks like Jormungandr, I guess, is really open to pick a lot of different stuff here in this matchup, just right in to the Stone of Bind.
It's an interesting pickup, but this, again, just kind of screams team fight oriented for me as Exordium underneath some pressure on their blue buff. maniaKK and Faeles going to successfully steal the blue buff. Froisan now coming back for the action.
And they're locked inside the Dharmic Pillars. First blood for Genetic. Simplicity get on the board here first, but Cozyx answers back immediately, though it does look as though he had to abandon Alka to make it work. No, he's able to drop the spit and slow Simplicity just enough for his Ganesh to make it back out. So they traded away 1-for-1 and lose the blue buff and first blood.
Jungler for the life of a jungler as Itori now trying to get a little frisky here with StreakUp. Rewind going to be lost in the process. StreakUp still trying to charge his final judgment, but he's got backup with DeathPanter, and Itori might just get caught out.
It's a long way to go, but it looks like he recognized where DeathPanter was. Has to use the Desert Fury here. In comes the evade and punish. Itori, no chance to survive against that many members in his lane, and StreakUp finds another kill for Simplicity.
Only so far that Chronos could actually run without those purification beads. And what hurts the most, Finch, he only had about 10-15 more seconds left before they were available again, and would have definitely been able to get out of there scot-free. But now Froisan, hoping to answer back, has Alka waiting on the wing, but knows that with Genetics present, StreakUp dying is just too unlikely.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a ton of sympathy for Itori. I mean, he was the one looking for the invade, so he didn't have beats.
Yeah, sympathy isn't exactly something that I'm aiming for here, but I could definitely respect the confidence.
Right. Yes.
And trying to take advantage of the situation, because Chronos does have some leverage in the early game in terms of buff security through that time rift and the stop time even. Both of those abilities combined together, certainly more than enough to get the job done.
It's a pretty nice sash from Faeles. He just needs the harder ones, it looks like, as Impale's there to follow up, and Froisan never stood a chance. Najah gets that one started off yet again. I'm telling you, this god is still good.
And this is where the discussion starts to kind of shift a little bit more towards that blink versus beads area. And it's a pretty steep risk versus reward. And oftentimes in these types of situations, Finch, I feel like you almost always have to go beads as that first relic if you are the Serqet.
Or you got to be more
it's just too guaranteed.
Active than this, but you're right, it is too guaranteed as StreakUp gets hit by the Ganesh Dharmic Pillar. Silence to prevent the dash, but there was no follow-up in that time window. Exordium still trying to make this invade happen as Final Judgment comes through, and Alka never stood a chance. Not only is Alka low, but angry on his way out of the fight as well, too, as he gets clipped by way too much damage. And Froisan on the right with no beads still, and DeathPanter finds one more.
With the assistance of Faeles, StreakUp, though, evade and punish forward. Angry's going to get caught out now, stuck through the evade and punish route. Auto attack to finish the job, and with 3 members having just died, Simplicity are now going to siege this T1 tower in mid, and this could very well be the open doorway towards the Gold Fury. As soon as DeathPanter and co get a chance to back to base, spend up a little bit of that gold, I think it's really unlikely that Exordium tries to rush down that Gold Fury, and I don't think they could even get the job done by the time Simplicity is back on the map.
Yeah, Simplicity now have an iron grip on the map. You know, I called the gank Faeles went for with Froisan harder than the one that he went for up against Itori, but I mean, you're right. With Froisan not having the beads, the timings are a lot simpler. Faeles might have been trying to see if he could bait out Itori's beads before he ulted and lost the timing there. But I mean, that set up for so much for them around the map. Even on the back of that pick from Froisan, Exordium consider looking for that red buff invade and lose a ton there.
It's just so hard for a Serqet, I think, to find a period to punish when you're dealing with a Terra who's got a root, she's got her wall collapse done. Terra's blessing is frustrating when trying to utilize that last breath. And then, to make matters worse, there's just so much range from Simplicity.
Right.
They've got Anhur, they've got Thoth. Even maniaKK with the recall demons has a pretty decent area surrounding him to kind of shoot that damage out, and it's just tough, I think, for this Serqet to really work her way in for a solid gank opportunity.
Froisan near Genetics, but I don't think there's a whole lot he can do, and he'll back off instead. I mean, Genetics is a higher level than him, the enemy support, so that's never a good look for the jungler. Oracle's now secured by Simplicity. They did not get the Gold Fury off the back of that one fight, but they've got vision control and a ton of wards around the Gold Fury. I'd be very surprised if they don't come over to this soon.
Simplicity they're getting into position. They're clearing out waves. They're looking for the red buff invading against Exordium, and if this leads to a pick, expect that Gold Fury to come with it, Finch, because Itori recognizes a lot of Simplicity members hovering this Gold Fury pit, and I think Exordium know that this gold could definitely be in danger, but they're taking their time, just waiting to see where Simplicity goes next. And in a sense, it makes sense. But on the other hand, do you really want to let Simplicity have that much control over the pacing?
Look where Froisan is on the map as well, Taco. There's just no farm over there. And I think Froisan's recognizing it as well.
No farm in his jungle either.
Yeah, there's just nothing to get, so he's got to back at this point, basically. There's nothing out there for him. And when he gets to speed, maniaKK will beat him to that timer as well. And Gold Fury now being looked at by Simplicity. Alka wants to try and get in range, but he's been hit by the Windfire Wheel, so no chance for a steal there either. There's nowhere left for Exordium to go on the map.
StreakUp with the KS.
That's mine.
Yeah, he wanted it. He got it. 4-0-0 for this Thoth, sitting pretty at level 14 also. Right there next to maniaKK, and Itori, the only member that's really managing to keep up. Cozyx also, but I think it's mostly because of the fact that he's got solo lane farm, trailing just a little bit behind maniaKK because of maniaKK's frequent buff invades.
Right, and there was a little bit where the Totem of Khus were favoring maniaKK, but I think he took some time to look for the invades instead, so Cozyx was able to catch back up in terms of the totems, but as he said, everywhere else maniaKK has stepped a little bit further out in front.
Going straight for that blue buff one more time. maniaKK has been doing this all game long, and it's just so tough for this Jormungandr to have the outsteal against that. How do you fight that? The Zhong just has so much burst on the buff.
Froisan, angry, Alka, all here to try and help out Cozyx, and maniaKK will become the target, suddenly seeing action, but a two-man stun from Genetics into the three-man root slows down everything Exordium want to do. There is the knock-up onto Genetics, but actually keeps him out of Cozyx's damage. Finally, Angry comes in and seals the deal. It takes 4, but Genetics ends up falling.
And I'm not even really all that sold on the fight. I think it was a great punish from Exordium. maniaKK arguably overextending by looking for those consistent blue buff invades against Cozyx. But the main problem in my mind with that last fight, Finch, is that Faeles could have used the Windfire Wheels. He chose not to. It seems as though this Zhong is really trying to hold on to that cooldown until he's got a guaranteed marker onto Froisan.
And wants to make sure he can try and take Froisan out of those fights. I do also want to point out that that fight started trying to punish maniaKK, but it's Genetics they end up killing. He dies to keep his solo laner up and farming, which I actually think is pretty worth. That really mitigates the value of that pick from Exordium. I don't know if they get a ton out of that just by killing Genetics. I mean, he's right back with his Genji's Garden ready to go.
Lowest level on the team as well.
Yeah.
And not really worth much of anything, in all honesty. At least not in comparison to his teammate counterparts. But that being said, Cozyx probably happy to have a little moment of relief here, because that rotation from Exordium did kind of give the heads up to Simplicity that they can't consider the solo side of the map a freebie anymore.
No, if they just want to walk up and take blue buffs, they might have to invest in some wards, as DeathPanter finds himself a nice impale onto Angry. Froisan has third item Relic Dagger. I imagine that once he buys these beads next, he'll have them up more often is the idea, so he doesn't keep getting CC'd to death.
Well, I have a hard time believing the Relic Dagger's for the blink, because I've yet to see him get a chance to use it, other than for an escape, really. It's an aggressive build pathway, though, for a Serqet, for sure, to prioritize the cooldown reduction in the way that Froisan has. It's just kind of interesting on the same hand because of the fact that he hasn't really had a good chance to apply it.
Well, Cozyx should be out. It's the mid lane fight that's more interesting. Angry in some trouble, but he manages to avoid the damage, too. Good Dharmic Pillars from Alka. Slows down the chase, but maniaKK cleans things up. Alka's in trouble now as well. DeathPanter finds one of his own. And Exordium starting to get collapsed on. One Simplicity pick a spot to fight in, they just win the fight there.
Especially when they're all meshed up together. Red buff, though, going to be confirmed for Exordium, but Simplicity don't really mind or care. They've got this hieroglyphic wall to work through. StreakUp and DeathPanter gonna take down this T2 tower in no time at all. Meanwhile, Itori couldn't even get the T1 because maniaKK teleports in.
And now he's the one holding this left side wave, and suddenly this gank feels a lot less viable, doesn't it? In fact, maniaKK coming back in, knowing he's got backup in the wings, and that he can tank up and sustain long enough for the squad to make their way in. He does end up falling, but it's a 2-for-1. StreakUp gets a double, taking down Itori and Froisan.
The last person I want to see get a double kill on the map right now would also probably have to be StreakUp. This Thoth does not need any more golden experience, Finch. He's already so far out in front. And now Itori, the one member who was keeping up, is going to be forced to fall behind as StreakUp finishes off that Obsidian Shard. Good amount of pen, good amount of cooldowns. This Thoth is fully online.
Yes, this is full scare time here now. Obsidian Shard, the kick in the door method of penetration, that's going to work for Alka and Cozyx. Both will certainly crumble beneath the percent pen on this option. But Taco, how does Exordium, I guess, try and relieve this pressure here on the map? Because everywhere Simplicity picks and plants their flag to fight, it seems like they're winning.
Look for surprise groupings and try to ambush members of Simplicity individually. We've seen it a handful of times now where it's worked out for Exordium, and it's almost always led to a pick, but they need to be more adamant about actively seeking out those ambushes. I just don't think that we've seen enough of them, especially not for how much you would expect to when you think about the fact that it is Serqet, it is Ullr. That is super aggressive already.
That's a great point. Aside from this Chronos, this comp doesn't get a whole lot better the later the game goes on. Alka considering defending the Primal Fury, but no way you can contest it with a final judgment on the table. Alka drops the Dharmic Pillars, but maniaKK keeps up the chase, even through the ultimate from Alka. No way he survives that one. The Zhong, a little bit too strong.
Recall Demons, though, now on cooldown, along with every other ultimate from Simplicity. This could be a better time to fight if Exordium just weren't so damn far behind, Finch. They are just missing out sorely on that golden experience, and it is a really felt difference when you're not even at the 20-minute mark and there's already about 7,000 both ways separating you from the lead.
And now they're going to finally start getting some towers. They got the tier 2 early, but aside from that, this lead has all been generated off the map, which are some of the hardest ones to overcome. This tier 2 tower left, Exordium aren't even going to be able to defend. It buckles quickly. Froisan way over on the right-hand side of the map, but not much he can do there. Instead, he can Simplicity grab the tier 2 and back.
This Serqet, I think, had the right intention, but the lack of execution to work. And I'm not going to blame it solely on Froisan because, in all honesty, Finch, I think that this is really just a less experienced team trying to run uphill with, like, 3,000 pounds attached to their waist.
Oh my goodness.
Simplicity really are that good. And I do think that Exordium definitely has some pieces of potential, more specifically looking towards Angry based off of a lot of his past performances, but Simplicity are just hitting him where it hurts. They're not letting Angry do anything.
Yeah, this whole team has been surprisingly quiet. Froisan and Angry in particular, but it's because Froisan and Alka have been getting bullied since minute 1 here in this game. Simplicity have made them their focus. Both without beads, at least before 12, and no way to escape. Pyromancer gonna go down for Simplicity. It looks as though Cozyx recognized they were on it, but I mean, what can they do about it at this point? They can't exactly get in there and fight.
the best hope for a comeback would definitely have to be around. Maybe Itori gets a chance to split push, but then again, with the way that maniaKK has been playing bodyguard to Simplicity's tower structures, that's not going to be an easy feat to overcome either. But Froisan hasn't even really had a chance to try and farm the map. He's just been getting the table scraps.
Level 16, even still, Faeles enjoys a 2-level advantage over him. Froisan really only towers over the enemy support in terms of experience at this point, which is something. He was behind Genetics earlier on in the game. I think it was around the level 9 mark or so before Froisan was behind. So some progress, but relative to the damage dealers, he's in trouble.
Oh yeah, and relative especially against a Terra at that, because one more time, that Terra's blessing really does mitigate a lot of the damage that would probably happen otherwise.
I do want to point out the Runeforged to hammer for Faeles. He went Runeforged into the Runic Shield, and I feel like we don't normally see this here for the Najah, but it makes a ton of sense. There's plenty of CC at his disposal.
This is all utility-based from Faeles. He doesn't have to be the center of attention. All he has to do is connect the sashes, connect the ultimates, and he's in the clear. Simplicity is happy because they have beautiful follow-up between that Final Judgment, Desert Fury. We've seen a lot of times throughout this early game segments even where DeathPanter wasn't even using the Desert Fury. He would just set up the obelisk and then immediately look for that impale to continue the crowd control chain.
And it's been working so well for Simplicity. Things are getting even harder for Exordium. Gem of Isolation for Simplicity. No sprints, no wing blades or anything of that variety from Exordium. No way they're going to get away from all those slows on top of the control Simplicity already have. And Fire Giant now under siege, and half HP and maniaKK the front line. But this is a bait. Simplicity just want the fight instead. The Dharmic Pillars have already been dropped, and they've brought Cozyx down quite low, forced him into that World Eater ultimate. Alka's been rooted as well, but they can't afford to keep chasing him. They'll root him instead, and now start dropping in the damage. maniaKK blinks to the other side of the fray, and he finds a couple there.
2 members for the price of nothing as Faeles continues pushing forward, trying to see if there's anybody left behind that Exordium won't be able to help peel out like the rest. Only the carries survive, so I guess in a sense Exordium's tanks definitely accomplished what they were after, and that's eating the brunt of the damage. But now Faeles gonna not be able to take anybody up into the air. That Windfire Wheel's off the mark. Good beats from Froisan, but stop time on the other hand from Itori could be problematic.
Well, Faeles, excuse me, is finally going to end up dropping because he could only 2v1, not 3v1 in that scenario. Meanwhile, the whole rest of his team got Fire Giant. So I think Simplicity are okay still.
Not only that, but Faeles also forced the relics from both the Serqet and the Chronos.
They would have lost the 2v1, I think, yeah.
They would 100% lost the 2v1, but the fact that they lost both of their relics as Simplicity finishes bringing down that Fire Giant, they're not going to have 100-something seconds to wait before Simplicity is knocking on the doors of those Phoenixes. Simplicity will be there probably within the next 40 or so. Depends on whether or not they want this Gold Fury first, and only one T2 tower left standing on the map. This is going to be a tough battle for Exordium. Now, unlike before, where if those carries actually had the actives and they'd be able to, have some more survivability, but Simplicity can just dive at free will.
That is the Gold Fury down. Faeles has rejoined the squad. The only one without the Fire Giant buff around his waist now, Taco, and Simplicity ready to start pushing in on the left-hand side. Exordium desperately searching for whatever farm they can. Froisan and Itori have grouped up to try and push out right, but they're going to need to get back sooner rather than later. The back's now finally channeled as Simplicity catch up this next wave. And as you mentioned, the relic situation's dire. Still another minute before Angry has Aegis back up and 30 on Beads, 30 on Beads for Itori, and 90 on Aegis for the Chronos as well.
This is still tough though, Finch. 30 seconds-ish left on Itori and Froisan's Purification Beads, and that's probably the most important relic right now when dealing with the Simplicity comp. Well, if you don't count maniaKK with the Recall Demons.
Yeah, that's a pretty big cooldown as well. maniaKK gets hit by the Corpus Kiss, but Angry and Cozyx take a ton of damage. Final Judgment was almost enough to send the Jormungandr home. Instead, they'll have to hang out in the box for a little while the rest of the team shreds the left side. Phoenix, even with the Dharmic Pillar, Simplicity undeterred.
But Genetics will drop that Terra ultimate just for good measure so that no one else from Exordium would try to collapse while inside of the Dharmic Pillars. But losing those Dharmic Pillars definitely hurts. I don't think Alka was wrong to expend that cooldown. Probably looked as though Simplicity were going to commit a lot harder, like Angry right now in the backline getting committed on by maniaKK.
And that Angry does make his way back out. They actually have really good return damage. StreakUp is the one that falls first. Genetics in some trouble here too. maniaKK couldn't quite get Angry, and the backline paid for it. StreakUp gets removed.
I like that. That's cute from Froisan. Taunts maniaKK and then instantly realizes, hold up, I have no damage here for this.
I don't actually want this now that I think about it.
But that was a great turn and burn for sure out of Exordium. They just took advantage of maniaKK blinking all the way to the back line, and that temporary split was that brief lapse for Exordium to work through. StreakUp dying. Kind of surprised that Simplicity would back off entirely from StreakUp dying, but probably just not willing to risk their lead. I mean, why not take it easy?
StreakUp died, and maniaKK was still splintered off from the group. I think when they decided to back off, he was kind of over near right Phoenix. That's a path that he had to take to get out. So with just the 3 left, I think I'm with Simplicity back up. Let this Fire Giant buff fall off another minute, go get the actual Fire Giant when it spawns, and then push back in. All Exordium did, I think, was give themselves another 3 minutes or so to try and get farmed up, and hopefully they can do the same thing again on the next team.
Hey, any delay is good news for
Right.
Exordium right now when you're in this position. The real bummer is the fact that Simplicity were able to take that left side Phoenix, because it being the furthest away, it'll be the most difficult for Exordium to have any control over, because I'd imagine that Simplicity might be looking to just send maniaKK over or somebody that can push up and just keep that continuous flow of fire minions headed towards Exordium's Titan.
maniaKK could always teleport back if needed at the FG, so he makes sense to me as the one that they would send. Exordium, though, have shown some signs of life, I think, on this final defense, and I imagine that's largely around Itori and whatever CC they can get for him so that he can at least land a couple of abilities. I mean, look where he is in the damage charts. He just hasn't had room yet to do a lot, even though he's almost 6 slotted.
But most of the damage has to come from Itori and Cozyx right now, and I feel like that's another problem entirely for this Exordium roster. It's just Angry and Froisan have really been struggling to make their impact known, and with Ullr, it's mostly one of those things where Angry just didn't get off to a strong enough lead in the early game, or even stalemated. I think the DeathPanter has just been so far out in front because of the teamwork from Simplicity that it's been really difficult for Angry to try and keep up.
At this point, yeah, Angry has not been able to do much, and Ullr, unlike some other gods we'll mention, you know, at least Odin still cages. I mean, if Ullr's not doing relevant damage, he's really not able to do much for your team at all. He is level 25 slotted, needs to get rid of the Mage's Blessing once he has a little bit more gold. So his damage is there, but not nearly compared to what Simplicity are putting out.
Maybe a Brawler's in that last item slot over the Mage's Blessing, but
Sure.
that gold being so strained, it's been really tough for Exordium to stay relevant in terms of itemization. So the fact that they were able to find a pick period onto StreakUp, I think, is rather impressive, but also pretty much confines Exordium to pretty much only being able to fight underneath those Phoenixes. I think that any overextension outside of that Phoenix territory is probably just asking for a disaster.
Agreed, and they've already got the Phoenix in the long lane back up for Exordium, so they will be able to defend. Though it'll probably be a bit of a soft defense, it's so hard to keep them up unless they have some time to regain at least somehow.
But I believe this might actually be a fire minion wave possibly with the Oni Fury stim.
Well, that's pretty nice.
And that's gonna feel pretty good if you're Simplicity on that left-hand side pushing inwards. No, looks like it's just the Oni minion. So that last wave being pushed out by Angry then. Angry doing just about all he can. I think it makes sense for Exordium to try and get that Ullr as much farm as possible for this next couple of sieging periods from Simplicity.
At the very least, though, experience no longer a problem for Exordium. They're mostly just worried about the 16,000 gold and then who has the Fire Giant buff here at this point in the game for the big difference makers between these squads. You still have a few blessings that need to be sold off, some relics to upgrade. You sell boots and get your elixir speed out now as well. Those are definitely still some relevance to this gold disparity, but for the most part, Exordium are about to be caught up before too long.
DeathPanter gonna drop the Desert Fury and cancel immediately, throws it real deep to the backline, but might have put off more than he could chew. No, gonna stay alive for the moment, narrowly avoids that final judgment.
Yeah, that might have caught some of his hair in the back, but fails. He's able to grab the mid-Phoenix. That's a one fight for Simplicity just because of that, and then he weaves his way through and finds a target for the Windfire Wheels, and Angry, of course. What a sequence there from Faeles on the Naja. Alka now in some trouble as well as he's been stunned, and Faeles keeps the pain coming. StreakUp removes Froisan Cozyx, trying his best but can't do enough up against DeathPanter, and just like that, Itori gonna have to watch the Titan fall as Simplicity in prime position to take game one.
This Chronos has some hopes and dreams, but I don't think they're gonna be able to make it happen. Faeles gonna sash into the fountain, but this is mostly Simplicity understanding that there's no chance of this Chronos interfering with that game end.
Yes, I mean at this point it's that one's over, right?
Yeah.
Once they get the 4 members already. And like I said in the moment, man, Faeles, that was a great sequence from him. He was the one that broke off, grabbed the mid-Phoenix, was able to find Angry in the middle of all that traffic, too.
Faeles, honestly, I think, kind of broke that base defense wide open.
Agreed.
Because the split push was a great idea from Simplicity, definitely necessary because they were having some difficulties actually breaking through on their own accord. But I think that that's mostly bad luck for Froisan on that last bit. Tries to go in for the kill, can't find it, and then it's pretty much just over from there.
Really strong performance there from Simplicity. I know it was a little bit over 30 minutes, but they were in control of that game for basically the entirety of it. That means a lot has to be done in between if there's going to be any bounce back. We'll see if it happens after the break.
The SMITE Console League is brought to you by Titan Forge Games, the developers of SMITE.
Welcome back to the Analyst Disc, everybody. Simplicity get game one, and they dominate throughout. In the words of the late, great Danny Green, they are who we thought they were, and that was pretty easy for Simplicity. Aggro joined by Anatoly, and Anatoly, look, this is the top end of the minor league versus the bottom end. This is kind of what we expected to see.
Yeah, unfortunately for Froisan, he fell behind very early that game with the 3 deaths. At one point, he was level 8 on the Serqet jungle, when on the opposite end, Genetics on the support was level 9.
Yeah, that's not what you're looking for necessarily. You said that Froisan had to get off to a very good start and really found just about anything but. And so Exordium, back to the drawing board. I mean, you take your lessons, you learn what Simplicity do in game one. You learn that StreakUp probably shouldn't be allowed to play Thoth. I mean, he was clean on that selection. maniaKK certainly plenty of player damage on that Zhong, kind of as expected. That's the thing, though. I mean, Simplicity didn't do anything different than what we thought they would probably do.
Sure.
After looking at picks and bans, that they just Simplicity do. They just played better.
I'm surprised that it was actually Simplicity that ganked the dual lane against the Chronos versus vice versa, where it should have been the Serqet ganking out this Thoth. To end the game with only 1 death for a StreakUp, I think is kind of a failure for Exordium. They should have been punishing this Thoth a lot harder.
Sure, that's somewhere where you could certainly see Exordium trying to make some improvements get ready for game number 2 in the picks and bans there. I mean, that's the big thing. I mean, you just got to try and find a way to go back to the drawing board and find a composition that ends up working a little bit better for you. Maybe you end up getting Simplicity to give you something like Set or Isis, especially getting that first pick slot. Feel like that's a little bit more possible now that Exordium is getting that top pick.
It felt like they were so outclassed as well, because if we look at the very end of the game, it was the point when they were trying to defend their left side Phoenix, and they couldn't even defend that in a 5-on-4 situation when Faeles was split pushing down the middle lane. It was too far ahead with Simplicity.
So Chernobog banned away first and foremost here by Exordium, and then Khepri banned by Simplicity. It seems like the EU Minor League has gotten a pretty healthy meta sort of understanding going in the scrims just based on these bans. Every team banning very similar things. We aren't necessarily seeing banned at the top level. A lot more Chernobog bans here. DeathPanter's kind of giving everyone the proof that god's really good. A lot of Khepri bans here, and you'll see both of those time to time at the SPL level, but not this consistent.
No, definitely not. Sometimes we'll see the Anhur bans in the SPL. That's kind of the go-to hunter in the mid lane. A Muzen comes from time to time as Thoth, StreakUp. Makes a lot of sense. Ending that last game at 7-1-6.
Absolutely. You don't want to let him have that. So both Set and Thor are open right now as Ullr unbanned away by Simplicity, as well as gods like AMC and like Zhong. So no, Zhong actually is banned by Exordium, excuse me. So Set is the pick, top overall by Exordium, so that's a good start, I'd say, for their picks and bans. This is a god that can get the ball rolling early and carry the game all by himself.
You got to look for a lot of CC now to disrupt this set from diving that backline. I'm looking at gods like Hunt Bats. Dodgy is a good way to go about doing so. Maybe ways to keep your targets alive against this set, either Xing Chen or the Geb, seeing how Khepri's already banned.
Yeah, I like both of those ideas. As Morrigan, Jorm, the 2 picks here for Simplicity. Just a good, safe transformation for the Morrigan. A great laning phase, basically guaranteed by this Jormungandr. Almost certainly for maniaKK over there in the short lane. He's liked that quite a bit during this season. So Exordium now have a couple different routes they can go, and Merlin is going to be choice number 1. No Chronos pick by Simplicity yet, no Merlin pick. A little surprised they leave that open because StreakUp loves both of those selections. I guess they felt confident they would get one or the other.
Maybe so. I think that the matchup of Morrigan versus the Merlin in the long lane could favor out Simplicity as well if StreakUp wants to do that. He'll always have opportunities to go into the Merlin, so it's not as though it's completely forgotten for him.
That is true. Plus, I mean, think about it this way. Morrigan stealth in the long lane, stun the Merlin, he beats, flickers away, and then the Morrigan transforms into Set and says,
what's up?
You're dead now, because that's how this is going to work. Like that idea. Also like the idea of potentially getting an extra Serqet last breath in your composition is Simplicity's top 3. All great transformation targets. Exordium's Kumbhakarna can be a bit of a nuisance, though, when it comes to this much mobility and kind of can keep these fights going. Maybe Exordium can really lean on that Kumbhakarna to get it done.
Could also still be the Serqet support for genetics. We never really know. I think crowd control with the addition of Hunbats and the Serqet is still a great way to really punish this set, keep the Kumbhakarna locked down long enough to get him under that sleepy time passive, and then finally get the kill.
Wouldn't mind seeing that whatsoever. The set selection for Exordium still very up in the air on where it's going to go. Really can play 4 roles at a very top level. Everything save for support, I think, is a viable spot to play Set right now in competitive play. So Exordium's draft feels pretty wide open to me. You could put Merlin in mid, you could put him in long lane. You've got options right now if you're Exordium, as they've got a pick coming up, but they've got to wait for Simplicity on the back end. You mentioned Hunbats. I think that'd be a great pick, but go with something safe here, see the rest of the composition, and then pick what could be your jungler if you want to put that Serqet in support. AMC, pretty tough to find a game where you don't want to play this god.
Yeah, I think this means that we're not going to see Merlin mid against the Muzen Cobb. You can't really stack with that pushing power also. You don't want to trade basic attacks with the Muzen Cobb anytime soon. So probably fight fire with fire, stick the Hou Yi in the mid lane. At least you're going to have control with the Suns. There's a huge AoE control factor, a lot of slows as well to be able to alleviate that pressure that the Serqet is about to bring.
So it will be Set in the solo lane with this Pele selection. I almost think, though, on the other side, totally, that you want to match the Hou Yi up against the Morrigan so you can mark her consistently.
True.
And keep track of that stealth. That's something that you can certainly make use of. As Da Ji You wanted extra control alongside. Powwow certainly does that. Lots of non-CC immune ults on the other side. Merlin, Set, Hou Yi all fit that bill. I love this dodgy pick.
It's looking really good, I think, for Simplicity.
Simplicity looking to sweep this one clean 2-0 and keep Exordium out of the win column so far here in Phase 2. Finch and Taco bringing you Game 2.
Do we get to bust out the brooms? We'll find out momentarily. Angry taking the Merlin into the middle lane. Cozyx has the Set in the short lane over in solo. And Itori will be piloting the Hou Yi instead of the Chronos, as Genetics blinks his way away from the Set to go be aggressive near speed.
This is a really aggressive composition from Simplicity in general, though, Finch. You've got Genetics on the Serqet support, Faeles with this dodgy. In fact, I'm seeing a lot of dive, but only if StreakUp can make it through this laning phase first. Itori getting the better end of this Morrigan off of that early damage.
Can Alka do the speed buff by himself up there, by the way? Because it was Genetics who came down and got the other one. And Alka's working on the speed buff up top, but it looks like he will be able to get that one. No one's on their way. Meanwhile, Genetics is now taking the red. We've just kind of swapped jungles or something.
Genetics having the time of his life. He understands Serqet, Deathbane. Best confirmation in the game. Froisan gonna look to try and chase this Serqet down, but how do you chase down a Serqet with your speed buff?
That's right, she's faster than you are. Itori has slowed Genetics down and pushed him a little bit back towards the jungle, but a nice bit of juking has now brought Faeles into the equation. Itori might have suddenly bit off too much, especially if he doesn't have the dive bombs here. But he does and repositions back towards the tower. Faeles commits a little bit of damage there, but can't find the first pick. Froisan very nearly does die. That's beats.
Itori gonna throw out the ricochet, but mostly as a warning shot because Faeles and StreakUp make sure to take care of that purple buff, no problem. maniaKK, on the other hand, holding it down in the 2v1 because Cozyx right here alongside of Alka. Blue buffs also untouched.
That's right. Up until this point, they've not been taken. Because DeathPanter has this red buff, I'm thinking that they must have succeeded on securing their own red buff on the Chaos side. I don't think anyone picked up the Order side Chaos buff. Genetics here near the blue buff, but not much chance of stealing that.
Genetics is really just trying to make this jungler's life hell right now for Exordium, and it's working. Froisan still sitting at level 2, and it's not really the levels that I'm concerned about. It's so much as it is the buff timers that Simplicity now have so much control over. They've got signs on Exordium's red, they've got signs on Exordium's purple buff, and the speed, and it's going to be real tough for Froisan to get away from this Serqet.
I don't think Genetics is going to be able to get the speed here this time. Angry, Froisan, and Alka all here to defend, but he's doing a ton of damage on this Kumbha. But even if they get the passive, they won't be able to actually proc it. So Genetics is still very much in danger of dropping here for first blood. All they've done is strip away the Kumbhakarna passive, who just barely gets up in time to dash, but Faeles comes in with the Trickster Spirit, and they do find first blood for Simplicity, and they're going to get the speed. Okay.
DeathPanter just picking up where his teammates left off. maniaKK, by the way, casually at Exordium's back. Harpies, and this is just miserable right now for Exordium, Finch. It's just so much overwhelming pressure from Simplicity, and they're just not giving Exordium room to think.
And this is mostly Genetics, by the way. You can just, I feel very confident in saying that. He's played this Serqet very well, and this is what Serqet can do, because a lot of the times with these supports and the start you go, I mean, look how he did. He just went boots to start the game off, and he's zooming around the map with it. That was close.
Thought he was going to die there for a second, but the stun came through. Faeles, on the other hand, taking care of Froisan, who was looking for the counter invade on DeathPanter's red buff, but not worth paying the ultimate price in my mind, Finch.
Nope, and his life is now forfeit. 2 on the board for Simplicity, and they still have the enemy speed buff timer, enemy red buff timer. I think their own speed is over there if at any point Faeles wants to go get it. The map is theirs, it feels like. Again, I said that 15 minutes into game 1. I'm saying it's 4 minutes into game 2.
It's the gold gap that's starting to develop off of these buff invades alone. 1,400, 1,300 more likely, and the main issue with that is it's so early. It's not even 5 minutes in yet, and there's already a +1K gold lead.
And Genetics is just all in on this Boots Rush, by the way. Warrior Tabi. This is not a support Serqet yet. This is just an extra Serqet that you have to deal with, doing all the normal Serqet things for 4.5 minutes to a game. And Froisan is going to fall here yet again. Faeles has 3 in a row. Not only have they been stealing all the buffs, but all the kills are on Faeles.
Whew! StreakUp cutting it kind of close there. Itori nearly getting the better end of that Morrigan. But this has just been abusive so far from Simplicity. And Alka doesn't have that Kumbhakarna pass to fall back on. Will wind up dying to that dot damage out of Faeles. And there is so much damage across the board from all these Simplicity members. Speed buff, though, finally gonna make its way to Froisan. First one, I believe, that he's managed to get all game.
I think so, too. The other one that Exordium got went to Alka, who had to clear the enemy speed by himself. But sometimes you'll see our pros tweeting a little bit upset about how some games went like some scrims, and I think this is what it looks like behind the scenes, where this early support start, when it really, really works like it has for Genetics here, it can feel oppressive, especially when it's a Serqet with just regular boots. That's just an extra Serqet you got to deal with.
And even with Exordium being able to reestablish their own buff timer by securing that red, the damage has already been done. Froisan is 2 levels behind Faeles, and not only that, Finch, but Pele is who you would expect to have all the aggression in the first place. Not a Dodgy. Dodgy, that's like a mid to late game aspect that you're looking for. And for Froisan to be this far behind already, it shuts down a lot of that early game presence that Exordium was probably aiming for by taking this Hou-Yi set and Pele in the first place.
And now Alka in trouble yet again. This is his 3rd death of the game. And you could tell because of where Genetics was lined up, they were waiting on him to take that pathing into the jungle. Yet another unfortunate spill, and Faeles was there to clean up his own speed this time. So Simplicity can likely give it another try at the red and speed buff invades again.
This is about to get ugly, though. Angry, gonna eat the stinger. But won't put it in a place where DeathPanter can pick it back up again. Froisan on the retreat, gonna use those beads to evade the powwow, but can't get away from the last breath.
Yeah, I thought I avoided the first gank from DeathPanter, which you did survive. But what about the second gank from Faeles? Well, you made it out of that one, but what about the 3rd gank when Genetics also rotates in? Can't make it through all of them.
3rd time's the charm for a reason, Finch, and for Simplicity, if that's the level of crowd control to try and evade, hold that thought though. StreakUp in this 1v1 now with Itori gonna get soloed cleanly.
Yeah, Itori really needed that, and now he might even end up paying for it because that's how far ahead Faeles is that he make the free rotation. The only thing going well for Exordium immediately gets answered back.
And in fact, that might actually be the worst case scenario, because not only does Itori's life or bounty go up for establishing that pick in the first place, but then Faeles scoops it right back up.
Yeah, instead of on StreakUp, who probably won't be able to use it for a while, it goes right to Faeles, who can make immediate use of it elsewhere on the map. Perhaps that is even worse now that you've said it, Taco. But Exordium can certainly still, I think, get control of this game back, and they're doing the right things. Rotating multiple members over towards these buffs and not letting Simplicity continue to strip them away.
But all of these frequent rotations from Exordium are still impacting the amount of farm that they're actually getting from these lanes, because they're not having time to sit in the lanes. They're just being pressured so often that they're constantly looking to rotate just to try and match the number difference.
That was a very good route there from Alka. He preemptively pulled it to slow down maniaKK. It ends up working to slow down Faeles and allows him to reposition and get back out of there. Yet again, though, Faeles deep into the jungle, up onto the powwow, trying to pull in Angry. He's going to pull in more than Angry, pulls in Angry, but follows up. Is Froisan there with his own Volcanic Lightning, and finally Faeles bit off a bit more than he could chew. That was very well played by Froisan.
Interrupted at least several times, though, with that Trickster Spirit. Probably a little bit of frustration raining through for Faeles there. Was super stubborn about trying to commit to Angry for that pickoff, but Angry probably happy that he actually had the boys in the back to back him up.
That time had a little bit of help as Cozyx in danger of getting soloed. Not quite the solo, but Genetics will get the kill blinking in. Alka wants to try and punish, but Genetics likely has the tools to get back out of here. Last breath allows for the reposition.
He's gone. Genetics is just gonna deathbane straight through this tower line. Now Alka's got nothing left. Oh, you Sunbreaker. Gonna get the job done here for Itori as he takes down yet another clean solo kill in the process, and the last breath, just not enough.
DeathPanter get the read on where he's at. Can't get in there in time with just the honey, which means that Itori gets away scot-free with his life. And this is the hydration pack. This is the one thing that Exordium can look to try and keep them in this game, is that Itori kind of styling on StreakUp here a bit.
This is a really strong matchup as well for Itori that he can look to try and spiral out of control, especially with how much pressure Simplicity is applying specifically towards that solo side of the map. It's probably one of the main reasons why Itori has had so much alone time with StreakUp, and I'm glad that he's taking full advantage of it. But on that same note, Finch, it's not going to be easy for Itori to translate this lead when the other 4 members on his team are so far behind.
Yeah, this is, I think, why mages are over here in the long lane so much more often, is because it is going to be a lot harder for Itori to rotate over and have a really big impact with his lead, as opposed to like a Zhong or a Thoth in that same spot. And because it's a bit slower the build path he's going, Ninja Tabai to devour his gauntlets, I mean, that's not going to be ready to rock and roll immediately.
Plus, I think it's only a matter of time before Itori has his own devices used against him, because StreakUp could always look for that Hou-Yi transformation, and what's better than turning into the guy that keeps beating you up?
Yeah, give him a taste of his own medicines. Froisan has to use Volcanic Lightning defensively. That's a good call, as Faeles was going to use the Pele to try and follow up, but now to no avail. Instead, he'll drop back down.
But that's not the only initiation tool that Simplicity have to fall back on, unlike Exordium, who I think are much more dependent on that Volcanic Eruption for getting the ball rolling here. But Oracles will be taken, and now Cozyx could be in some trouble.
Cozyx does make it back to the Tier 2 tower, and this time Genetics won't jump on him underneath it for a cleanup kill. He'll make it all the way out, but it'll cost him the Tier 1 tower. And Cozyx doesn't even have teleport, even though he doesn't have to go that far anymore. He's got beads, so he'll have to do the full walk back.
This is just starting to feel more and more like a never-ending cycle of retreating, though, for Exordium, Finch. And Simplicity just keep Exordium so spread that they continue to take the global offerings across the map elsewhere. Pyromets are going to wind up falling because Cozyx and Froisan get pushed back to the depths of their T2 tower. Exordium, at best, their best response has been to just reestablish their own buff timers, and even those don't feel that great. Feels more like Simplicity is letting them have it.
Right, but Simplicity like, all right, we don't need to keep risking it going in there for these buffs. Just let Exordium clear them. Eventually, Exordium can run back to, Tier 2 towers or Phoenixes and defend from there. So I think there is an eventual end game as maniaKK is rotated over for Itori. Gets forced into the ultimate. He might even try and look for the cleanup, but instead he'll use the last 2 charges to retreat. Froisan's done a great job of that, of showing up and rotating enough to try and keep his team alive in a couple of spots, but he makes up into the air, but he's going the wrong way. He's dead.
Teammates just not close enough to pick up the pieces quite right away, but Genetics will wind up falling to that shred damage out of Angry, who might actually be pretty angry right now, Finch.
I imagine so. It's been a rough game. But I do think that Itori, ironically, is a good deal more valuable than Genetics in this matchup in particular, because he's the one that's been doing a good job of against StreakUp, as Gold Fury's been pulled by Simplicity. Faeles will pull in at least Alka to keep away from the objective, and do more than that. They should be able to find a kill here quite easily. Cozyx now can't rotate in the way he'd like to. Simplicity grabbed the objective and a pick.
When all said and done, Exordium, they've had a couple of answer backs, Finch, but nowhere near enough to make up the difference that Simplicity has opened up here in game number 2. And this is much more rapid of a pace than what we saw in game 1 from Simplicity. It just seems like a never-ending battering of Exordium in their own jungle.
Do you think Genetics could end up in trouble here, Taka, without having a Guardian's Blessing? Like, that's a lot of gold, I imagine, he'd be potentially missing out on to make this rush into the Gauntlet Thieves and the Relic Dagger. Do you think Alka has a chance to catch back up through that?
Not really, no.
All right.
This is just too much of a lead right now from Genetics, and it's only going to get bigger because Serqet sufficiently, or way better at farming, I should say, but Cozyx right now just hoping to run away from StreakUp, getting run down out of this Changeling transformation.
And that is all that it takes. Had a little bit of backup there from maniaKK, but StreakUp making good use of the dodge that Faeles has farmed up to take care of Cozyx, who ends up being sent back to base. And this set has gotten to do exactly nothing so far this game.
Man, if you think about it, StreakUp legit is profiting for feeding. Meanwhile, Faeles doing all the dirty work, getting nice and fed, just giving StreakUp a freebie. Just letting him copy his homer for free.
Yeah, I think Itori has unfortunately gotten the short end of the stick by actually getting ahead. All he's done is give StreakUp better targets. Now, DeathPanter is definitely going to die here. Froisan gets that kill, but Faeles is here with some backup from StreakUp and Genetics. Too much damage. They make it 2 for 1. It just cost them DeathPanter is all.
And going back to that initial question about Genetics and being punished for the Guardian's Blessing, I think the window of opportunity to punish Genetics for not having that Guardian's Blessing has long since left the building. As Cozyx will sand clone forward, trying to utilize some of that Sandstorm. Good damage now from Itori on the follow-up, but StreakUp still going.
StreakUp juking the best he can, finds a 2-man stun, but eventually ends up dying all the same. But there's a good chance that Simplicity can get a couple cleanup kills. Faeles finds his way towards Itori, but with Trickster Spirit on cooldown, Cozyx at the very least is out. And I said up until now he'd been doing nothing. Now he's got himself a kill.
Kingslayer paying off big time to deal with that Morrigan in the 2v1 scenario. But when StreakUp is as farmed as that Morrigan is, it makes perfect sense why it would take 2 to be better than the 1. But the point still stands. Simplicity still have amassed a pretty significant lead here over Exordium. And the brief positives that have been taking place for Exordium, and I really want to highlight the fact that they have been very briefly lived, because Simplicity almost always immediately answers back by either taking out 1 member, 2 members, sometimes even more.
And Simplicity are starting to close a few doors. The Brawler's Beat Stick is there for DeathPanter to try and slow down some of the self-sustain, particularly from Froisan and Cozyx. Set and Pele both really rely on being able to stick in the back line through some self-sustain, and that will be cut a little bit by DeathPanter's Brawler's Beat Stick. We'll see if anyone else goes the same route.
On the bright side, though, Froisan is now out-leveling Genetics, and I really can't stress it enough, Finch. There is no worse feeling as a jungler than realizing you are the exact same level as the enemy team support. You really feel like you're doing nothing and like your impact is non-existent. But Froisan now starting to finally come back from that hole he got put into at the very start of this match.
And I want to say through not really any fault of his own, it's just that Genetics played the early game with this Serqet very well and was willing to risk going for the tier 2 boots to get things started. Faeles does get his back interrupted as Pyromancer goes down for Simplicity. But I actually think Froisan's played relatively well, all things considered, with the way that his game started.
And it looks as though Lono's mask could be underway now for Genetics, as if this Serqet wasn't tanky enough, but StreakUp probably wishing he had a little bit of that tankiness at his disposal as Cozyx and Froisan two-piece that Morrigan in an instance.
And Exordium have just started grouping now. No more of this getting picked by ourselves nonsense. Let's see what kind of things we can force if we just bring everyone together. They've got 4 members in right, but now they might have finally stepped a bit too far forward considering the tier 2. They've got Genetics, who dropped the last breath, but maniaKK here as well. Faeles gets Itori very early on, and into the World Serpent goes maniaKK.
Full disengage now from Exordium as everybody tries to scurry to get out of sight, but maniaKK could be able to run down Cozyx no problem in that World Serpent. Froisan, Angry, and Alka look as though they've managed to get away for now. That is until Faeles blinks forward, finds Froisan inside that blue buff.
And uses the Trickster Spirit for a little bit more damage, but the return from Angry and Alka is actually quite potent. They find another return kill of their own, and I think this group up from Exordium, I know it might have looked a bit shaky there, but this probably the best they can do is try and, instead of be 5 disparate behind people, try and be 1 close team fight.
It doesn't matter how ugly it looks, as long as it gets the job done.
Agreed.
That is all that Exordium are after right now in terms of trying to recover this match so that we can possibly see a Game 3 performance. But for right now, Finch, it still continues to be a never-ending uphill battle for Exordium as Froisan will walk over, clear out what's remaining of the red buff camp, because the buff has already been sieged by DeathPanter, I'm assuming, since he was all alone on that duo side of the map while the rest of his team was engaging with Exordium's 5-man grouping in solo.
but Simplicity, I haven't been able to find anything aside from this last Fury for a little bit. I think this grouping from Exordium has slowed them at least some. I wonder if that's exactly the strategy they'll continue to go back to. They have Itori and Froisan splitting farm over and left. Cozyx desperately getting what he can on right. And Angry there in mid, getting the middle lane. But for the most part, Exordium have gone back to kind of laning here again.
Or at least trying to. Mostly just trying to find whatever farm they can. Whatever Simplicity is left behind. Cozyx gonna get taunted in by Genetics. Deathbane damage though, not too problematic for a set that has a Glad Shield and a Blackthorn Hammer. But my other problem is Exordium were getting pounded in this early game fashion. This is kind of aggressive build pathways for some of the members out of Exordium, all things considered with how ugly that early game looked.
Alka has picked up this Hide of the Urchin, and if they're going to go to this skirmishy kind of trade strategy where they're all grouped up, I actually think that that might be the perfect item for this, because he'll likely at least get a couple of assists on the way out. What do you think about this pickup from Alka?
I have to hope so, at least. Now that he's got it, it's a
That's right.
fairly expensive support item to invest towards, especially when you're already behind. I say it's expensive because it's not like guaranteed stats.
Right. It's reliant on your team getting some kills or assists to get that stacked up, as Faeles will continue how the game started by looking at the enemy speed buff. It's not there just yet though, so he gives up on it. Simplicity maintained control around this fire giant pit. Angry with no beads if he does want to come in and try and help. So it's good that he's way over here on the left-hand side.
This could be trouble though, because Simplicity, they're just making quick work of this fire giant. Alka now trying to break through, see if he can get on top, but Simplicity immediately disengaged. They just want the fight now.
That's exactly what they want all along, was to force Exordium into this battle. Looks like Alka will not be finding any stacks. He takes an early exit. Right inside the middle of everything, Froisan does find a nice knockup, but even with the Suns, it's not enough damage as Simplicity stays alive. In fact, Faeles wants to keep chasing Itori, who wants to dive bomb over the wall, but instead catches the damage from DeathPanter. A clean 3-for-0 fight for Simplicity.
This is nightmare fuel, by the way. Genetics gonna be able to catch out Angry before he has a chance to back. Angry sitting kind of low with this mana. Genetics gonna be able to chase this Merlin till the end of time, and there's no telling if the rest of Simplicity is interested in cutting him off or not, or if they'll even have to wait for that moment, because Genetic, I think he just catches Angry and kills him.
He should be able to catch up to him, and once he has the Deathbane, but Alka's on his way, and Genetics doesn't have that much damage, so I think Angry has a good chance to live. Cozyx, on the other hand, incredibly low, does get some nice damage there with those clones, and has made his way out of the fight. But the rest of Simplicity is going to head right back towards FG.
Cozyx has to back. Angry just got a chance to back. There's no way that anyone from Exordium can try and intervene with this fire giant. Sure enough, Simplicity gonna bring it down, no problem in the end. And could have had it sooner, but just more interested in confirming the kills first. Don't want to give Exordium any real opportunities to try and bring this match back to life.
Alka, or rather Angry, was able, I believe, to get the tier 2 tower on the left-hand side during all of that, Taco, so that's kind of at least something that Angry was able to do, but Genetics stops him from being able to do anything further with the Phoenix, chases both he and Alka away so they can't contest the FG, and now Simplicity have the Fire Giant buff on all 5 members and a 10,000 gold lead. And as you mentioned earlier, now that this Lonos is finished for Genetics, he'll be able to absorb plenty of damage.
A possible Spirit Robe or Mantle of Discord could be next, and either one of those options would be strong takes for this Serqet support. And I'm not saying it's over, Finch, because we've seen Exordium have a little bit of a bite back in their Phoenix defense from game 1, but it's not going to be easy. I like this move, though, from Pele and the set, split pushing that T2 tower just to give Exordium a little bit of gold to try and work with, maybe see if there's any items to be finished off. Itori has that Executioner now, and that's actually a pretty big swing in damage for the Hou Yi.
Looks as though Exordium wanted to see if they could strip away a couple of Phoenixes, but it might end up costing Froisan here. He doesn't commit to the back in time and gets caught on the retreat. He wasn't there alone. I think he had Cozyx with him for a bit of that. They do at least get the tier 2 in right, but ends up costing the life. And Simplicity grabbed the Fury so they can group to push.
Cozyx also dipped instantly.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you have to do. Cut your losses short. Don't lose 2 for nothing when you only need one to actually die in the process. But I don't know if Froisan necessarily had to Volcanic Eruption in. I think that he could have maybe looked for it on the disengage and tried to bank on getting away. He does have the blink available.
And a ton of movement speed. I think Froisan started channeling his back first, but then quit. And so Cozyx made it back out for Froisan. Either way, it's a mid-Phoenix siege, and Alka won't be here for any of it. StreakUp removes him in Act 1. Act 2 is trouble for Cozyx, as well as for whoever's been chained here by this dodgy. Faeles brings Angry right back in, and a second member joins them back in the fountain. Mid-Phoenix crumbles to the ground, and all 5 members of Simplicity stand tall.
No Sunbreaker left for Itori either. The only one with an ultimate is going to be Alka, but he's still got 14 seconds till he respawns. So with that in mind, Simplicity ain't going to make their way over to this left side of the map. Just going for the furthest Phoenix away from that Fire Giant, and just in case something does go south here, although seems unlikely with Angry out for another 30 seconds.
Look how short some of these cooldown or respawn timers are, especially for Alka. 7 deaths, level 13, he's right back into the fray. But I don't know how much he can do, as the left side Phoenix is already been removed. Simplicity do so much damage to these structures at this point between DeathPanter and Faeles and Genetics when they get up close to the actual structure itself. Just no way for Exordium to defend.
And Simplicity probably could have been looking for the push-in to end, continue playing it safe, and I guess in a sense that's kind of what I would expect from a team as seasoned as Simplicity by this stage. It's just, why take the risk when the victory is almost, I don't want to say guaranteed at this point, because I do still think that if Alka is able to stay alive long enough to get a decent epic uppercut off onto a priority target like DeathPanter or StreakUp, maybe that's enough of a delay for Exordium to try and cycle through these Phoenix defense iterations of the respawn Firebirds. It's just so tough in these situations, though, at the same time, Finch, because it really is just so much dive from Simplicity, and it is nightmare fuel just seeing 2 dodgies come running at you.
Itori does not have beads, and he's just used the Aegis. Angry, though, has found himself a maniac. That is a nice starting block for Exordium, but will it be enough as Itori clings to life for a moment, but Faeles ends up punishing. The rest of Simplicity are here, minus Maniac, to catch any more lives they can. 2 pulled back in, Cozyx and Alka. We'll see you all back at the fountain. That mez was nice. 4 members were mezzed, but it's just not going to be anywhere near enough. A 4v2 for Simplicity.
Short-lived victory for Angry. He killed Maniac and doesn't really get to reap any benefits for it. DeathPanter gonna get a decent chunk of his health taken out by Froisan, but it's too little too late. This Merlin's gonna wind up falling alongside of his Pele into the clean 5-man wipe as Simplicity looked to bring this one home.
D aside, we out here as Simplicity are the ones that come out on top 2-0 over Exordium, and what honestly was a pretty dominant showing here from this team. I mean, we expect it from Simplicity. I think they're up there with the very best in all of the minor league, but I expect Exordium to be able to come with them a little bit closer, but this time it wasn't the case.
It's tough stuff, though, for sure. This one kind of just got away from Exordium in the early game more than anything else, Finch. I just don't think that Exordium were really expecting that level of aggression and pressure right away from Simplicity, because that really was just, as soon as that clock hit 0, Genetics is already in the other team's jungle.
That's right, yeah. They ended up leaving that speed buff farming to Alka to be the one that goes back and gets the enemy speed buff, and Genetics was there on the backline the entire game. And really the question, I think you're right, becomes how do you answer that earlier on in the game? Because later on, they're too far behind to do much of anything.
It needed the groupings to happen a little bit sooner, but hindsight's 20/20 for a reason,
right.
And I think that this is just part of the growing process here for Exordium.
And remember, that is a risky strategy that Genetics goes from. As many times as you get that result where your team snowballs out of control, you int in that same spot, right? And you have no chance to fight back into it, so it's a risky strategy.
In the alternate universe.
Right, exactly.
Genetics just feeds his brains out.
There's one world where that ended up happening, but it wasn't this one. So again, congratulations to our top team here, Simplicity, for winning that match. We should be moving on to North America after this on the other side of the break.